If you were a kid in the late 80s, chances are you had your hands on a rectangular gray controller, gripping it tightly as the road blurred past you in a red Ferrari. Fast cars, high-speed action, and an iconic chiptune soundtrack with a splash of Miami Vice, Rad Racer was more than just another NES racing game. It was Nintendo's answer to Sega's OutRun, and one of the first racing games to showcase 3D effects on the console. But behind the wheel of this 1987 classic, there's a story of innovation, hidden features, and a make-or-break scenario for Square. Yes, that Square. Today, we're diving deep into the neon-lit, tire-screeching world of Rad Racer. So buckle up, because this is pure 8-bit adrenaline. Let's get started. And if this is your first time here at the channel, my name is Tyler, and if you love gaming from all generations like we do here at G3, then consider hitting that subscribe button and hit that bell for notifications so you don't miss anything. It's 1987. Top Gun rules the box office, Miami Vice defines fashion, and if you're lucky, your living room looks like a scene straight out of the Radio Shack catalog. Again, Sega's OutRun was the undisputed king of the road, featuring smooth sprite scaling and a branching track system. Square, a company still searching for its identity, wanted in on the action, or should I say, desperately needed a hit. And when the big dogs at Nintendo needed help creating a racing game for their 8-bit home consoles, this was an opportunity that Square could not pass up. But to ultimately understand Rad Racer's history, we first have to rewind to Japan in 1986. Nintendo was dominating the home console market with the Famicom, but they weren't just wanting to make cute platformers or puzzle games. No, they wanted to capture the arcade thrill, and for that, outsourcing helped Nintendo fill a niche without investing in new tech or development pipelines internally. Nintendo turned to a then young development team at Square led by Hironobu Sakaguchi, who would later create the Final Fantasy series. In fact, Square was struggling financially before Final Fantasy's release, and Rad Racer played a key role in keeping the company afloat. But Sakaguchi knew he needed help to compete with Sega's OutRun on the limited Nintendo home console hardware, and he needed it fast. So he recruited the secret weapon of 80s programming, Nasir Gebelli, who was a genius with programming visual effects and could pull off things that Sakaguchi would believe that would even impress Nintendo. Although I have found sources that Nasir initially met with Nintendo prior to working with Square, and that Shigeru Miyamoto and the team at Nintendo were not initially impressed enough to consider working with Nasir directly. And with Nintendo soon to be releasing its Famicom 3D system, Sakaguchi successfully gambled that Nasir would be able to incorporate workable 3D elements for Square to contribute to the Famicom. Sakaguchi was quoted, "Nasir was brilliant. He could code incredibly fast. Sometimes we'd just tell him what we wanted to see, and by the next day, it was on the screen." Nasir's first Famicom game under the Square banner was Tobadase Daisakusen for the Famicom Disk System, which would be released as 3D World Runner in early 1987 for the NES. But today's video focuses on Nasir's second contribution released in Japan in August 1987, and it was a racing game titled Highway Star, which was a technical marvel at the time, utilizing a technique called pseudo-3D sprite scaling along with parallax scrolling to simulate depth and speed, dubbed superscalar type graphics. But tapping the select button would incorporate true 3D elements specifically developed for the Famicom 3D system, which was a pair of LCD shutter glasses released in Japan, making it one of the few early Nintendo games to support stereoscopic 3D. It's rumored that the name Highway Star was a nod to the Deep Purple song of the same name, and with all of the Deep Purple connections to the original Legend of Zelda music, I can totally see this being the true inspiration. Highway Star hit the Famicom in August of 1987, but just a few months later in October 1987, North America released the same game for the NES, aimed at the 80s American pop culture vibe called Rad Racer. Rad Racer was one of the few NES games that supported 3D glasses. By pressing select, players could activate an anaglyph 3D mode, which worked with the included classic red and blue glasses. However, this was a much inferior form of 3D compared to the Famicom 3D system, which still allowed for the full spectrum of colors and demonstrated a better 3D depth effect, and I can confirm this myself. Yeah, the red and blue washed out version of the NES reminds me of the letdown I had after watching Freddy's Dead in 3D at the theaters back in the day. Anyone else fall for that Freddy's Dead gimmick? Let me know in the comments. But I will agree that at least the NES game had 3D glasses included with the game, but the Famicom version of Highway Star required you to additionally purchase the Famicom 3D system, and it wasn't even available until a few months after Highway Star's release in November 1987. Another little Easter egg nod to the Famicom title is that despite the change of the name to Rad Racer on the NES, you can still see the Highway Star HS logo on the vehicle select screen. And there are even stars in the spokes of the Ferrari hubcaps. Rad Racer was one of the earliest NES games to utilize the MMC1 memory chip, which allowed for smoother scrolling and more complex sprite handling. But what made Rad Racer stand out wasn't just the speed, it was the vibe. You could choose from the iconic red 328 twin-turbo Ferrari or the F1 machine. I mean, just pick the Ferrari, right? You also don't get to experience other varieties of great car opponents if you use the F1 machine too. So just don't do it if you want the true Rad Racer experience, in my opinion. And that music. Yes, those tracks you could actually control by tapping down on the D-pad, which was a great sense of freedom and control as a kid. It was composed by Nobuo Uematsu. Yes, again, the same legend behind Final Fantasy's iconic soundtrack. There are 8 stages in Rad Racer, each with unique scenery, from palm-lined beaches to snowy alpine roads and neon-lit cityscapes. But Rad Racer wasn't just about speed and superficial graphics. If you're good at memorization and delayed gratification, then Rad Racer is the perfect game for you. And there is definitely foreshadowing to the Virtual Boy in the Rad Racer instruction manual. The paranoia of 3D glasses causing every gamer in the world to go blind was in full effect here, suggesting limiting to only 15 minutes of 3D continuous play. But let's be honest, using that red and blue effect for 15 minutes was way more than any of us likely chose to play Rad Racer. The manual supplies a few generic strategies to help you succeed in Rad Racer, but combining these suggestions with general strategies from the official Nintendo Player's Guide and How to Win at Nintendo Video Games provides a great methodical approach to the game. So now let's share some essential pro tips and strategies so you can finally beat Rad Racer. Again, much of Rad Racer's gameplay is memorization and pattern recognition. The first step for each race is to memorize the pattern of the turns and straightaways for each race when the course layout is displayed before each level. I mean, back in the day we would have to draw it out or write it down, but taking a pic with your phone today is perfect. So it is critical to know when you can safely give a turbo boost and when to expect your next set of curves. And might I add an interesting element to the turbo boost? The manual states that you can boost once the car reaches 100 km per hour. However, I feel it begins to boost you a little earlier, maybe say around 88 km per hour. Perhaps a little nod to Back to the Future, even though I still feel it was 88 miles per hour, but I still actually hope this is the true inspiration. Another key element in Rad Racer is mastering passing other cars. Using the slipstream to your advantage is crucial. Achieve this by following closely behind a car, which not only protects you from other vehicles, but also gives an opportunity for you to perform a break and dart technique lined out in the How to Win at Nintendo Games manual. Once you get behind the car you want to pass, tap the brake and be on pace with the speed of that car. Then you can pass by once you see an opening in a curve. And speaking of curves, the best approach to taking curves without losing speed is the out-in-out technique mentioned in the manual, and the official Nintendo Player's Guide gives a pretty much self-explanatory diagram as to how you should complete each curve properly. I'm not sure if the touch and turn technique mentioned in the manual and official Nintendo Player's Guide is a true strategy. This may be some sort of lost in translation issue because I am not sure how sending your car off to crash can help you in this game in any scenario. So let me know if there truly is a way to execute this. But don't get too discouraged while playing Rad Racer because you can always press the start button while holding down A after you lose a race to begin the race you just failed. It is also easy to skip to any level on Rad Racer. At the demo screen, press the B button one less than the track number to begin that game at that level. Then hold up and right on the D-pad and then press start. And if you really don't feel like playing the game, then tap the B button 64 times and execute the same button sequence and you will go straight to the ending scenes of Rad Racer. The game sold over 500,000 copies in North America alone. and over 2 million copies worldwide, a massive success for a non-Mario title in the late 80s. In 1990, Square released Rad Racer 2, a sequel that promised more cars, new tracks, and a better sense of speed. But despite the upgrades, it lacked the same magic as the original, and failed to make a lasting impact, and by the time Rad Racer 2 released in the new decade, the developers' energies were all in on the RPG genre like Final Fantasy. Still, Rad Racer remains a beloved part of NES history. Rad Racer was even shown off at the 1990 Nintendo World Championships as part of the gameplay triathlon. It was fast, familiar, and demanded precision, perfect for competitive play. Even today, retro racing fans remember Rad Racer not just for the gameplay, but for how it made you feel, proving that sometimes all you need is a fast car and an open road. If you enjoyed this trip down the 8-bit highway, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your favorite Rad Racer memory in the comments. Special shout out to this guy right here, because I do not know how to pronounce this, but he did find Mullet Boy first in our last Double Dribble NES Secrets and History video. Till next time guys, G3 out.